Okay, Mr. Deep T, you've made the point that Megabank has increased borrower repayment risk in its mortgage book. This does not indicate balance sheet problems. Mortgage collateral, that is, house prices, are still strong and the bank is well capitalized. Megabank has built its Tier 1 capital ratio to almost 10%. House prices readjusted negatively from their highs across the country by 4.5%, but recent interest rate decreases have halted this minor readjustment, with rises forecast by all major commentators over the next year. What else do we need to know? Megabank has a large capital base by international standards and strong mortgage collateral values. The bank is well positioned to withstand any adverse conditions that the markets may throw at us.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Your humility is reassuring, although to understand the true risk, we need to dig deeper than the headline numbers. How is the Tier 1 capital ratio calculated?
That's a stupid question, Mr. Deep T. It's the percentage of equity the bank holds against its assets. In our case, 10%.
With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, it's not. It's the amount of equity against risk-weighted assets.
That's what I said, risk-weighted assets. Megabank uses an internal risk-based approach allowed under the International Basel II standards. Our models have been assessed and approved by EPRA to calculate the risk of our mortgages relative to the standard and other bank assets. We've had a whole team of modelers, statisticians and math gurus on the case for quite some time. In this way, we can appropriately calculate the risk and therefore the weighting of the bank's mortgage assets. There you are, Deep T, gurus and a tick from the regulator, EPRA. What more do you want?
But exactly what is the calculation?
That's commercial in confidence, Deep T. All you and anyone else need to know is that the bank has complied with Basel II and EPRA regulation, and the regulator has signed off. I will not sit here and be subject to any insinuation that the bank has not acted appropriately in calculating its risk-weighted assets.
The issue is not whether the bank has acted inappropriately in its calculations. But your disclosure leaves many questions on the table. Under the Pillar 3 disclosures of Basel II, the bank is required to disclose its methodology and enough information so that an analyst could replicate the calculation. I have analyzed your disclosures and found it impossible to understand how risk-weighted assets were calculated.
Both our auditors and EPRA have signed off on our Pillar 3 disclosures. What more did I need to do?
Let's put Pillar 3 disclosures aside and just look at the risk. Fortunately, due to the mandate the board kindly awarded to me, I've had access to your models used in calculating risk-weighted assets and can comment on the risk. In essence, to assess the risks of residential mortgages, the bank uses historical information on defaults. It assesses the probability of default based on the loan-to-value ratio of mortgages that have defaulted historically using a minimum of 5 years data. Categorizing by the loan-to-valuation of the loans in its mortgage book, the method uses the historical default data to determine the probability of default of the whole book. Using a minimum loss given default plus the balance of the mortgage and expected loss is derived, which is then used to determine the risk weight of the assets. I'm being a little simplistic on a complicated matter. But Mr. Chairman, that's the guts of it.
Sounds perfectly reasonable. But I also do not see the issue. The bank has followed the Basel II rules for internal-based methodology and EPRA has signed off. Surely no one is suggesting that I'm required to do anything else.
The issue is not whether the bank has followed the rules of calculation or not, but what is the risk. The bank's methodology results in the bank's risk-weighted assets for residential mortgages to be around 20%. Which translates into a Tier 1 capital ratio of 1.6% of actual residential assets. The bank started deriving the methodology and then using it in a period of rising house prices. As house prices rose, defaults were low, reinforcing the low risk in capital calculation. This in turn incentivizes the bank to allocate more funds for mortgages with more aggressive underwriting criteria, driving up house prices and masking defaults. This cycle underestimates the risk and underallocates capital for quite some time. But once house prices begin to fall, the methodology requires extra capital to be allocated to cover the extra theoretical risk, even before any rise in defaults. It is pro-cyclical both ways.
Deep T, you may have a small point, but I'm amused by you, single-handedly questioning the whole premise of calculating risk-weighted assets under the Basel II standards, which was put together with all the resources and brains of the regulators around the globe. Who do you think you are? Why, even Megabank would never question the Basel II standards or APRA regulation, but simply follow in the knowledge that with strong regulation plus a strong regulator brings a strong bank. And forget as well one additional factor which protects Megabank: lender's mortgage insurance, which will cover any significant increase in mortgage losses the bank may incur.
Yes, the bank's mortgage book is covered by mortgage insurance for about half of the book, and the risky half at that. However, my analysis of mortgage insurance coverage reveals a pretty thin layer of protection. If the quality of the mortgage book deteriorates significantly, a large systemic problem may arise. The two mortgage insurance companies that Megabank relies on hold only about 0.7% capital against total assets.
0.7%. I presume the detail is in the report.
Yes, the analysis clearly demonstrates that the mortgage insurance providers hold 0.7% capital against 50% of the Megabank mortgage book, making total capital protection by Megabank and the mortgage insurers of 1.95%, and neither of the parent companies of these two mortgage insurers have the resources to significantly increase capital if claims increase significantly. Megabank cannot rely on the mortgage insurers to, in effect, prop up the balance sheet if times get tough. If arrears start to arise significantly, it's not the mortgage insurers that will be looking for capital but Megabank.
Okay, Deep T, I'll summarize, but I'm still not convinced that there is any need for Megabank to take any action. All your issues are hypothetical. Megabank has a minor but significant percentage of borrowers who are under severe mortgage stress, although defaults have not yet risen significantly. We are holding less than a 2% capital buffer, including mortgage insurance, against loss and funding risk on the total mortgage book. The minimum capital requirement is calculated under a method which, if house prices fall, could generate significant capital requirements for Megabank due to an unintended positive feedback loop. Lastly, the mortgage insurers are so lowly capitalized that their support in stressful times would make very little difference in providing capital support and maintaining Megabank's ability to continue to fund.
Correct.